Thursday at 11 a.m. From now until the last Thursday in March. Our featured topics include food insecurity, mental health, housing insecurity, and a look at where we go from here. And I hope that you will join us and our fantastic speakers for those discussions. This series was born out of the State of the Yolo Nonprofit Sector update that the Yolo Community Foundation developed in November. That update was based on a survey that about 40 Yolo nonprofits participated in, as well as interviews with close to a dozen local nonprofit executive directors. While there are, of course, a tremendous range of critical community needs and populations in need right now, the topics in this series were those that kept emerging in our research and that felt particularly important to highlight right now. That said, we are all ears for additional topics that the community would like to hear us explore, and we encourage you to reach out to us with any other thoughts or ideas. At the Yolo Community Foundation, our key goals are to inspire giving, support philanthropists, and serve nonprofits. And one way that we accomplish all three of those goals at once is to ensure that our local donors and other community members thoroughly understand the needs in our community, how nonprofits are working to address those needs, and the critical role that local nonprofits and donors play in supporting those efforts. So that is our primary goal for this series, is to equip all of you with the information that you need to come together and serve the community together. I'd also like to take a moment to thank our wonderful sponsor, Sutter Health. Without support from Sutter Health, we wouldn't be able to put on this series. As I'm sure many of you know, we have a lot of folks from the nonprofit sector here today, that Sutter Health is, of course, deeply involved in the response to this pandemic as a local healthcare organization, and is additionally a major supporter of local nonprofits and a major pillar in our community. I'd like to share the following statement in Sutter Health's own words. As a not-for-profit organization, Sutter Health reinvests in the communities we serve through community benefit programs that address priority health needs for underserved and vulnerable populations. Community is at the heart of who we are and what we do. Our work goes beyond traditional healthcare, and we extend support outside the walls of the hospitals and care centers, which helps improve the health of the overall community. We're thrilled to sponsor the Yolo Community Foundation's COVID-19 Community Needs Series and take part in these important discussions. We look forward to hearing from all the wonderful panelists, many of whom are collaborative partners of ours, and sharing the valuable information learned throughout the series with our organizations. And Sutter Health friends, we're so thrilled to have you join us today. I'd also like to take a quick moment to share a bit more about the Yolo Community Foundation for those of you who aren't familiar with us. Our mission is to inspire and support giving and to provide philanthropic leadership in our community. We were founded 20 years ago in 2001, and today we have about $7 million in assets across 65 individual funds that make up our foundation. In 2020, we made $1.5 million in grants, and we're an affiliate of the Sacramento Region Community Foundation. Our efforts fall into three primary pillars. First, inspiring giving, which is a big part of what we're hoping to do here today. We offer philanthropic funds that make giving easier, tax advantage, and more effective. And we also promote giving through events, media, and other outreach efforts. For instance, by highlighting community needs and showcasing compelling opportunities to make an impact. We also work to support philanthropists. The way I think about it is that our goal is to provide the education to help philanthropists be effective in their giving, to accomplish their philanthropic goals, the inspiration to be excited about giving, and a sense of connection to a community of peers that are working together to serve Yolo County through philanthropy. We do that through one-on-one staff support, research, introductions, background information, and so on, as well as events like site visits, small group discussions, and expert panels like our event today. Finally, we serve nonprofits directly. If we are doing those first two pillars well, that's the best way that we can serve nonprofits because we're growing the quantity and quality of giving in Yolo County. We also serve nonprofits as fund holders through our grant making initiatives and through our professional development programming, like the Yolo Nonprofit Leaders Alliance. As I mentioned, we have 65 funds. That's probably not familiar language for many of you. A key part of what we do is offer several types of philanthropic vehicles. So think like a financial vehicle, like a checking account or maybe a 401k, but for your charitable giving or your philanthropy. These funds can simplify giving, make giving more effective, and can have some significant tax advantages. And fund holders can also access foundation staff like myself and join a community of peers who are working together via philanthropy. Our most common fund type is a donor advised fund, which is a lot like a sort of a mini private foundation, except that whereas you wouldn't normally start a private foundation without a few $1 million, our donor advised funds have a minimum fund size of about $10,000. So if you're interested in learning more about how to collaborate with the Yolo Community Foundation, whether as a fund holder, a nonprofit partner, or any other relationship, please don't hesitate to contact me at jessicahubbard@yolocf.org. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to our moderator for today's panel on child and family needs, Tessa Smith. Tessa is the co-chair of Resilient Yolo, which is a collaborative of youth and family serving community-based organizations throughout Yolo County, whose mission is to create a more resilient community in which all can thrive through the provision of education and information on adverse childhood experiences, research, and trauma-informed care practices. It's a wonderful organization. If you haven't connected with them, I strongly encourage you to do so. Tessa works for Yolo County in the Mental Health Services Act unit, doing mental health outreach and engagement, and serves as the Health and Human Services lead for the strategic plan objective, addressing systemic inequities, and racial equity program and policy development, another critical area for us today. Tessa, thank you so much for moderating today. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jessica, and thank you, Sutter Health, and thank you, Yolo Community Foundation, for arranging for this really important discussion today. As Jessica said, the next 3 panels will focus narrowly on food insecurity, housing insecurity, and mental health. And the panel today is different, though. It focuses on a group that's impacted by all of those issues and more, and that's our children and our families. Critical issues were identified in the research done by Yolo Community Foundation, and the reality is we knew it, we felt it, and those outcomes were going to be just like this. The reality is that as we moved into distance learning, there was a real scramble by families, how to get the internet, how to get the tablets, where is a good desk, the lighting. And some families were able to do this easier than others. So one of the first issues that became apparent was an equity in the delivery of distance learning and services. Uncommon stress on families raised serious concerns too for child and parent mental health. After all, work and school and home activities collided under one roof in this moment. For others, concern for family members who worked outside the home, the fear of bringing COVID back to their family, especially perhaps for those living in multi-generational households. That brought added stress as well. Then there's a realization that comes that home is not always the safest place for our children. During this time of COVID, our children lost contact with safe adults outside of the home, and it's really added an increased risk of child abuse and domestic violence behind those closed doors. Adequate childcare became a challenge, leading to some children being left home alone while parents worked, and for other parents, especially mothers, being forced to leave the workforce altogether. Our goals for today are to more deeply understand what our most vulnerable children and families need during these difficult times, what local nonprofits and government entities are doing to address those needs, and how our community can support them. So let me introduce you to our panel for today's discussion. I see first up is Jeneba Lahai. She is the Director of Programs for the Yolo County Children's Alliance, overseeing the Family Resource Center, Housing and Homelessness Services Programs, Strengthening Families, Healthy Families Yolo County, and the Child Abuse Prevention Council. Jeneba has made a remarkable impact in program and organizational development, community engagement, and interagency collaboration by establishing relationships with key partners in Yolo County and developing programs to meet the needs of the community. Jeneba also serves in leadership on the Yolo County Health Council, Yolo County's Homeless and Poverty Action Coalition, and the West Sacramento Housing Development Corporation. Thank you, Jeneba, for being with us today. Next, we have Garth Lewis. Garth is the superintendent of schools for Yolo County. He was elected to this position in 2018. Over the course of his 23-year career in K-12 education, Superintendent Lewis has served as a paraeducator, a teacher, a site and district administrator, and assistant superintendent of instructional services and equity at the Yolo County Office of Education. He also serves as a member of the board of directors for the California Association of Supervision and Curriculum Development. As county superintendent, Mr. Lewis, I know him as Garth. Mr. Lewis supports and provides leadership to approximately 300 employees and supports each of the 5 school districts and other key agencies that serve youth and families throughout Yolo County. He believes access to a high quality public education is a significant factor in improving life outcomes for all children, particularly those experiencing poverty. Thank you, Mr. Lewis, for being with us today. Thank you. Next is Heather Sleuter. Heather has been protecting children and preserving families for over 20 years. Since joining the Yolo Crisis Nursery in 2007, Heather has built numerous programs to save more children from abuse and neglect, to provide additional crisis resolution services for families, and to offer parent education and support. Heather is tireless in her efforts to help families, and she has built several partnerships with other social service organizations in Yolo County. Heather supervises all 3 Yolo Crisis Nursery licenses, respite care, daycare, and preschool. She is trained in trauma-informed care, holds her program director permit, and is a California Commissioner on teacher credentialing in child development. Thank you, Heather, for being here. And rounding out our panelists for today is Stacie Frerichs. Stacie is an executive director of Davis Art Center. During the previous 6 years, she has seen how art helps heal, bring joy, and bring resilience. Through working with First 5 Yolo, the Yolo chapter of the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and with Davis Joint Unified School District, RISE Incorporated, and the thousands of people who participate in Art Center activities, she understands that we are all more than our stories of loss and grief, but we are also our stories of survival, love, and resilience. She believes art is a valuable avenue for telling our stories and building a world where everyone is honored and can thrive. Thank you all again for joining us today. So let's begin our discussion. The first question, and this is for all of our panelists, for our children and families, please identify 2 of the most pressing needs arising from this pandemic as we turn our attention to addressing its aftermath. And I will ask Heather to start, followed by Garth, Jeneba, and then Stacie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Heather Sleuter, and I just wanted to start off by saying thank you for allowing me to be here today. Just to start off regarding the children and families through the pandemic, the crisis nursery saw right at the beginning is we were helping all the families be essential childcare workers, essential workers, and with no childcare. That was the extreme crisis that we saw right as we went into the pandemic. Families were making choices on if they were going to, who was going to stay home, if mom was going to quit the job. We definitely had, crisis evolve where people were also going home with no jobs. They were just laid off, and then no unemployment. They didn't know where they were going to get the next food, or where they're going to get any income coming into them. Also, the scare of losing their home and housing. So when we went through the first of the crisis nursery was full. We were at our max capacity. We were taking in children and families with no childcare. So The crisis nursery here, we can take up to 12 children during the day and 4 overnight. And that's not many in our county, but you can see 12 children. So rotating those children in and out, we were always at our max, and trying to also help out the families that when families were all positive with COVID, they had no one to turn to take care of the children. And also the hospitals were turning to us to see if we could take in the babies that were just delivered, that mom and the whole family, that no one to care for. So we were at our max capacity here at the nursery, on top of my staff being all essential workers as well, and being here and running around the clock for helping these families right at the beginning. Food insecurity and housing insecurity was vital to these families, and us at the nursery trying to, all of our partner agencies coming together and trying to find these services. But unfortunately, a lot of, we couldn't find other agencies that were also, trying to find them, that people that they were open, everyone that was changing over to, virtual distance learning, virtual learning, trying to find hotspots and tablets and trying to reach these families and supporting them. So I think right at the beginning, we were in a crisis. We definitely, thanks to the community fund, we were able to get families hotspots. We were able to access in-home parenting, in-home programs. All of my programs had to switch over to virtual learning and in-home hotspots immediately in that transition period, and training staff and having to engage in families and through engaging through that new system and teaching them how to get on a FaceTime or a hotspot or any type of computer. So it was a challenging time. I do have to say now, I really think that we're going into this aftermath of it. I feel like job stability and access to childcare are two items that are going to be critical for families transitioning out of this pandemic. In addition to access to mental health services are going to be key for any of these families that are going through this emotional pandemic recovery, and then like where we're going at with the new normal. One of the biggest challenges was also accessing families into mental health services and counseling where they needed and felt isolated. Counseling services in Yolo County were at their max too. There were people waiting on waiting lists that needed to speak to somebody more than ever, or just accessing that mental health system. And accessing the system too was at its max right when we went in. So, I think where we're going into that transition of this pandemic, I think having regular employment with reliable, safe childcare for families is going to be vital for families' stability for employment. Additional, the physical needs of parents who also provide the love and help for their children is also having to go through and get services for the trauma and everything they also experienced through this pandemic, of the scare of losing their house or becoming homeless or didn't know where to find food. Or we did see a huge increase in abuse, of neglect and domestic violence. One key concern that we did see through the hospitals and the transitions was postpartum depression was at its highest it's ever been at the crisis nursery since I've been here. And mothers having children and through postpartum, they didn't have anyone, a system or support systems at home to help and support them. So it was definitely a challenging time in Yolo County and for children and families. And the crisis nursery was a vital service to these families. And again, our goal here is that 98% of the families that walk through our doors do not go into child protective services. So my staff and this, all of the case managers working around the clock to make sure that there's safety plans and there's support systems around these families through this really important time. And it was a scary time for children and families in our community.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Heather. I have a feeling you answered 3 of your questions right there, but thank you so much. Thank you, Heather. Stacie, I think, did I call you next? Jeneba, right? Sorry, Garth, I've got something blocking your hand. Please go ahead.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Tessa. I too want to thank Jessica and the Yolo Community Foundation for scheduling today's session and allowing me to participate along with our fellow panelists. And thank you, Tessa, for agreeing to be our host this afternoon or this morning. I think for in the world of education, the initial time frame that we experienced to transition, to pivot, and to adapt to this new learning environment, we had essentially 72 hours, right, to make that adjustment from March 13th to March 16th, 2020. And I mean, it took a Herculean effort to message out to families what those changes were going to look like. Initially, we were thinking that by the time spring break was ended, we would be welcoming our students back to class. And here we are nearly a year later, still with roughly 93% of our students experiencing distance learning across the county. And this is not any different than what's happening in many counties across the state and across the nation. So I would just like to first, thank our parents, students, and educators for their efforts to pivot and adapt to the challenges and these uncertain times. I think the number one concern on educators' minds right now related to the aftermath of the pandemic is around social and emotional learning and the social emotional well-being of our students and our families, for that matter. I can tell you as an educational leader that I'm also, that's a high level of concern for me as it relates to my staff, to educators themselves. And so there are efforts underway to provide support at all levels. And many of the teachers have made some adjustments with creating office hours where there's time for students to socialize with one another, as well as with teachers, as a way to rebuild community in advance of welcoming students back to campus. I've also am hearing about virtual pep rallies being held at schools, again, to try and mimic as much as possible as what gives us a sense of belonging in the physical world. I think the other area of great need is going to be around acceleration of learning. So we know that in this pivot, some families have been better resourced than others. And we have a number of young people who have not been able to engage as well as we would like in the distance learning experience. So we anticipate over the next really 15 to 18 months, a very strong intentionality around accelerating learning for our students. In the news, it's been characterized as learning loss mitigation. We're choosing here in Yolo County as educators to really reframe this around accelerating learning, really understanding that our young people, once we're anticipating, once we have a chance to really be back in community, back in physical contact with our students, there'll be opportunities for us to host extended summer learning opportunities for students, extended opportunities in after school settings and context to accelerate learning. But all of that really is to say that there's a lot of attention that we're turning towards how we engage in re-socializing students and staff being back in community with one another in a physical sense.
Thank you, Garth. Thank you.
Hi. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jeneba Lahai of the Yolo County Children's Alliance. And I also want to express the same sentiments as Heather and Garth, that we are very grateful to Yolo Community Foundation and to Tessa for inviting us to be a part of this panel and part of this discussion. It's been a very challenging year. I'm still thinking of 2021 as 2020, but I will pivot soon. But it has been quite a challenging year. One of the things that I would like to start with is what happened in the beginning of the pandemic. And hopefully we can, as we move along in this discussion, the effects of the pandemic can be well seen throughout the timeline. So when, like Garth was saying, we had about 72 hours to pivot. So when we were notified of the shelter-in-place mandate, one of the things that came to mind directly, especially for community-based organizations, that work in the hard to reach community, like the underserved areas, work with immigrants, undocumented families, is that language capability. So one of the things that we noticed right away was some of the guidelines were not translated appropriately into the language, the key languages of our community members. Luckily, in Yolo County, one thing that I'll say about Yolo County is that all the organizations from the county to community-based organization, educational institution, everyone rallied together to make sure that that was addressed right away. So for our organization in particular, we serve Russian speakers, Spanish speakers, Farsi speakers, Pashto, Urdu, Hindi, Punjabi. West Sacramento in particular is a melting pot of so many different cultures. So as people were watching the news, they didn't really know what was going on. There was all these, anxiety and alarm in the news, but they didn't hear the news directly from a trusted source. So we participated early on. We called all of our clients, and that's over 5,000 people in our database. Yes, we were busy. We called in the languages. So we divided our list by languages and staff tackled it. So we called clients, talked them through the safety guidelines and the safety precautions about staying at home. And while doing that, we also were conducting case management in the form of, we're asking you to stay home, but you need food. So how do we connect you to food? And at the time, the Yolo Food Bank was doing the grocery delivery to seniors. So we participated in enrolling seniors on that list, got people connected to food and how to connect to food, talked about how to connected them with Wi-Fi services, because another thing too that we realize is the digital divide, right? You don't really think about those things. We say we live in America. I'm an immigrant from Sierra Leone. So I do have experience of a third world country. So you don't really realize that people are living in America without access to internet services or access to devices in order to be able to connect to a virtual platform. So we spent a lot of that time doing the work. Still are doing the work, but we can go back to that in the other questions. But for us right now in particular, one of the things that we're looking at that has been a consistent ongoing things for our families is the basic needs items. So you have a lot of parents staying at home. A lot of people are losing income because they have now a one income household or an income household that has had reduction in hours because of the pandemic. So they're now needing basic need items that they ideally would have been able to purchase with the little bit of money that they had. So we're looking at diapers, formula, wipes. We're looking at other things like food in particular. Although we have the weekly food distributions and food distributions throughout the county, people are on CalFresh. There are items like, baby food that someone may not potentially be able to get at a food distribution or to purchase. So we are having to do emergency food vouchers. We're having to access our other donors and sponsors where we're purchasing Walmart gift cards and grocery outlet gift cards and giving it to families so that they can buy those needed items that their families need at home. One of the things that I really think about as someone from an immigrant culture as well is that we eat differently. We eat different food. So normally when you go to food distribution, you have the standard American fare. So when you give someone the ability to have a gift card from a store, when you go to Walmart, you have like the cultural section, right? So we were able to implement that for families. Another thing that I see as a great need, of course, is income stability. And Heather did mention that. One of the things that Yolo County Children's Alliance does really well is our VITA services, which is a free tax preparation services program. And all the family resource centers in Yolo County also implement that program. Empower Yolo does it, RISE also does it. So throughout the pandemic, we were the ones that people were referring families to in order for them to fill out their back taxes, in order for them to be eligible for the stimulus. So when this first stimulus came out, we had a rush of people. VITA is something that's ongoing for us. We just started VITA season again. It's just something that's continuous, trying to make sure that people who have not accessed that stimulus, there are 2 stimulus payments, that they have that little bit of income as well. and of course, ongoing activities with basic needs.
Mhm, mhm. Thank you, Jeneba. Thank you so much. Stacie.
Yeah, I want to echo everyone saying thank you for the opportunity to be on this panel. And I'm honored to be sitting here with numbers of people that I've worked with over the years. So I just wanted to start my thoughts about two current needs that we see is by a quote from Tabitha Primera, and it's trauma not transformed is trauma transferred. And I believe strongly that arts and culture has a role right now in helping transform that trauma so that it is not transferred to our next generation and our kids that are surviving this really unprecedented time. And so the first thing I see is that the arts and culture organizations can provide a place, tools, and a process to really process grief, process the trauma that the kids and families are experiencing, and we're seeing that in some of the work we're doing with First Five Yolo. So a place to process the grief so it doesn't become trauma transferred to a next generation. And then the second is arts and culture organizations have experienced huge declines in workers during this pandemic. Estimates say that 40% of arts and culture workers are unemployed right now. And prior to the pandemic, one of the reasons why I got into working with the social services organizations within Yolo County is I saw that our teaching artists and our arts and culture workers are de facto mental health first responders. We work with the entire community, and so whatever is happening in the community happens in our art classes. And art happens to be a way that people can really process that grief and the trauma that's happening to them. And so I want to get tools for our teaching artists to be better at understanding what's happening in the classroom and referring people to appropriate services. And so what my next worry is that we're going to be thought of as a place to process all of this trauma and grief, and we have fewer people, and we're asking them to do more around mental health services. And so that's where I got into this work and what my focus is now and where I see the arts and culture needs.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Stacie. One thing is really clear from your responses, panelists, is so much work has been done to meet this moment. We appreciate each and every one of you, and the stress of doing it so clear in the way it's just, we did one of these, and still we're racing as fast as we can against this clock as we're trying to make a way out of this pandemic. So we appreciate you. That comes from the whole community, not just me, I'm sure. Well, let's see what next question we might have. And I'm going to try to combine them just a little bit because so much was covered, and I really want you to have a full time to kind of to give a full statement there at the beginning. But I want to ask you, Garth, since you mentioned about this leaning into not learning loss, but advancing the learning and accelerated learning. Can you speak to that more? And who do you think is going to need that the most? And by this, I'm going to ask you to speak on the issue of equity in this moment. Who has fallen behind? Where are the concerns at? And what can we do to address those things?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Tessa.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to just make mention before I share my thoughts that just recognizing and affirming the fact that schools don't operate in isolation, right? We operate as a part of the overall context of our communities, and the issues we see around inequities don't exist only in schools, right? They exist, as we see, in healthcare, housing, childcare, wealth, home ownership, in so many areas of our community functioning and what we would consider areas of success. We see these inequities show up along economic and racial lines. So I think that's a starting place for what I'll share. In terms of the need to accelerate learning, I would also recognize the fact that this has been a need prior to the pandemic. When we look at educational outcomes, again, around along the lines of economic status and race. And so we still see that in terms of accelerating learning, students who are coming to us from backgrounds in which families are living and experiencing poverty, families in which they're experiencing homelessness, many of our foster youth, because of instability in terms of their learning context and school connectivity. Students with special needs. And these are some of the student groups that we've prioritized for in-person learning. And so I'd mentioned early on that we have roughly 93% of our students in a distance learning format. The other 7% or so are on campuses, and across the county, districts have prioritized these particular student groups for what we refer to as small cohort learning pods or learning cohorts. So that one of the things that's being done right now, again, is to invite this particular student groups onto campuses in advance of the rest of the student body being invited to campus. We're also hosting learning hubs. So for students who have issues around connectivity within their home, there are opportunities for them to receive or to access the school district's broadband or Wi-Fi in schools. And so that's another way that we're working to mitigate this issue of quote unquote learning loss. Going forward, we are looking at opportunities to serve students in person with summer programming, with also, again, extended learning opportunities in the after school hours, and doing so in a way that engages our families as learning partners in ways that we haven't imagined in the past, right? It's always been important for us to engage and to empower families who we recognize them as the first teachers of their students. But in the current context, we're having to really lean on and leverage the full family ecosystem to its fullest capacity. And so there are offers also for our families to learn about how to best support students from a social and emotional standpoint. There have been offers of expert instruction and learning opportunities for families. We've offered support for parents of English learners. Again, really trying to tailor the learning experience for families to be responsive to their the needs of their specific students. We also recognize that going forward, even for students who are not identified as having special needs, there's going to be a need for us to really be specific about the individual learning needs of our students, and then building a responsive academic program for them. So we're seeing that this sort of individualization of the learning experience and allowing for students who, even into the fall, may be experiencing anxiety, may have a greater need to even remain at home. We're working towards figuring out ways to provide a hybrid experience even for some of those students. Understanding that the impacts, the effects of the pandemic, we anticipate will be, again, for months down the road, if not years. And so really looking for ways for the educational system to be much more flexible, much more individualized than we've had in the past.
As long as we've been doing that, somebody always has to go, you're still muted, you know. I want to ask you, Jeneba, about, because you're part of the Children's Alliance and you work with the Child Abuse Prevention Council especially, have you seen an increase in child abuse and neglect or domestic violence during this period? Is that a concern for us that we need to be aware of? And how have you been administering your services in this moment when we're still isolating?
So one of the things that we've done really well during this pandemic, although we had to periodically close our family resource centers, we still have two different programs that are home visitation programs. Our Healthy Families Yolo County program has seen an increase in cases, actually, in case management cases coming into the program.
Mhm.
So they are serving about 90 families ongoingly throughout the county. And they're doing virtual visits as well as going directly into the home as needed. One of the things that they've been really good with this throughout this whole process is, we've had families come into the program who were either essential workers or are essential workers, meaning they're working at the grocery store or they're working at care homes. And some of them have been infected with COVID. So one of the things that my manager is always telling me about is that I have all these clients in my program, they get infected with COVID, they're being told to stay home, they're losing income, they don't have any supports around them, family support around them to be able to go to the grocery store or to take care of the kids or to do this or to do that. So the team has really stepped up in a way where when our families are being told to quarantine, the team has been the one going to the food bank, doing grocery shopping for them, leaving basic needs item at the door, connecting those families to our rental assistance program that we've been implementing throughout this pandemic. We've actually helped keep people housed. We've paid over $100,000 in rental assistance throughout this pandemic through various grants and programs for West Sacramento and the entirety of Yolo County. So our Healthy Families Yolo County, they've experienced a lot of that where they've just been supporting families in quarantining and also supporting them through the process of just managing the stress. There's a lot of stress on families right now. There are not a lot of eyes on the kids. Sometimes, a parent will have some time to themselves by going to work, or they'll have that reprieve by sending kids to a friend's house or to a sports activity or to the library. They don't have that anymore. So these home visitation programs have been the eyes and ears. And they've literally been that, like Stacie said, that mental health worker in the home, making sure that families had access to what they needed to have access to in order to prevent child abuse and neglect. Domestic violence wise, we've seen that in our homeless services program with the homeless population. There's been some domestic violence. However, we've been able to mitigate it. We have a really great partner in Yolo. So we've been able to support the families through that. And one thing that the Child Abuse Prevention Council has done, CWS, Child Welfare Services, did report that there was a decrease in reporting in the beginning of the pandemic. And when reporting was coming in, it was mostly for, very serious, challenging issues within the home. So as a CAPC, what CAPC did was they got Sacramento County, with permission from Sacramento County, they got this reporting documentation that Sacramento County put out. So what CAPC did was they tailored it to Yolo County and made it culturally appropriate and disseminated our reporting document, made it easier for people to report. Because one of the things that we've heard over the years is that I see child abuse, I don't know if it's child abuse. I don't know if this is culturally appropriate. So there's just been a lot of hesitation about what child abuse is or what neglect is and how to report. So our CAPC has been very responsive in that regard, where they've tailored something and they've simplified it. They've made it culturally appropriate and culturally relevant. Tessa, you helped with that and have been able to disseminate that information to our other community-based partners, our families. It's on our website. So, this has been something that has been really important for us to do. Another thing too, that our Spanish speaking community, one of our facilitator, our parenting education facilitator, she shares with me all the time that public charge did a lot of damage under the previous administration. So a lot of our immigrants and undocumented families feel that they cannot ask for help or support. And they feel that it's a bad thing to ask for help and support, because that whole messaging again has been, oh, if you ask for help or support, you are not a competent adult. You're not able to take care of your family. So us in general at the Family Resource Center, with our trusted messengers and community workers, have been actively engaging with those families. We had no idea that a mother could not pay her rent, that she was providing childcare during the pandemic, and that, you know, she couldn't pay, she had children, and because her work hours were reduced, she couldn't pay her rent and they were about to get evicted. But because of the relationship, and she wouldn't tell anyone, because of the relationship she had with our facilitator, the facilitator was able to connect her with a housing program and help her maintain housing throughout this process. Although she has some back rent to pay, we're hoping that with the new initiative that California is rolling out, that we would be able to connect her to that program in order to pay her back rent. So it's just instances like that that have come up for us over this time.
Thank you, Jeneba. Thank you, Jeneba. And Heather, you know, working through the Yolo Crisis Nursery and working with First Five, I imagine you see a lot of stress in young mothers and in children. I know mine were going upside the wall. Let's just tell the truth here, shall we? You know, but what have you seen at the Crisis Nursery? If you could share just briefly, I sure would appreciate it.
Yes, you know, we do initial intake when mothers walk in the door, or fathers or families. We do an initial screening with them, and the stress level of their when they walk in the doors, it's immediate, they're at extreme stress, and the family's at extreme stress. So we try to litigate those concerns and try to immediately triage, like, what is the highest stress and concern of that family, and what are the needs. And then with our First Five programs, we do have the immediate Help Me Grow screening that will help with any type of screenings that the child needs, and then we are able to access and get them referrals, immediate access to services for those children. And through this pandemic, a lot of children's you know, social and emotional milestones are really affected right now by not being having that peer-to-peer interaction. So a lot of stress, I think, from younger children to teenagers. I mean, that stress of having that peer-to-peer one-on-one is pretty stressful in the community and in families as a whole. So, you know, we were able to identify the stress and then wrap those services around them. And with our First Five programs, you know, First Five has helped us. We do the Help Me Grow screenings through First Five. We have a mobile client navigator program that she goes out to all of the homeless shelters. We have a partnership with Empower Yolo, and we go out to the shelter, Empower Yolo shelter, and do the Help Me Grow screenings. And as soon as they access services there, we partner. We also partner with you know, Jeneba in our family engagement nights in Yolo County Children's Alliance, and partnering and making sure all these families get CalFresh and partner in family engagement night. It's super right now with the stress of having a family engagement night and everyone coming together and talking about their concerns and support systems and helping each other, because they don't have any support systems out there, is vital. In our partnerships with Yolo County Children's Alliance and all of the other agencies that we all partner with, we couldn't do it alone. We have to have each other to support each other and be able to help these families out to alleviate the stress. But the stress is there, and unfortunately stress leads to child abuse and neglect, and that's what we are seeing.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Heather. Stacie, because the arts are so important and outlets, psychosocial outlets in this moment are so important. What do you expect those social emotional needs to be as we emerge out, we start getting back to school and everything? What do you think is going to need to be done in that moment to give kids and parents that outlet to just plain lay this, what has become a burden, down in a healthy way? Can you speak on that for us?
Yeah, I can. I agree. There's going to be this whole ecosystem of our organizations working together to help move families forward. And I'll talk about two different things, our engagement with First Five YOLO. And what we've been doing is art with 0 to 5 and their family, friend, neighbor, caregivers, and their parent. And this has been really instrumental in how I've been thinking about what we need to provide to the community. But what we're seeing is a variety of people, and not necessarily the typical, what we think is the First Five YOLO client. And I think that's really beneficial because right now the entire world is experiencing trauma and a pandemic, and we want to be able to help everybody. And so what we're seeing is a lot of people, our First Five engagement is teaching parents and caregivers how to talk about art to engage the children in a really positive experience. And our goal is to provide a positive pathway to an adult in their lives. So if all other things are failing, they have somebody that they can look up to and have a moment of laughter or a good moment of fun and engagement. Because what we're seeing is every other part of life is really hard. And so even going to the grocery store can be really stressful. And so what we're hearing from people in our programs are things like, I would throw a craft at my kid and they'd be done with it in 5 minutes and asking me for something more. And now I understand what I can do with my child or the people I'm caregiving, and we work for an hour or hour and a half. We had one person say, my kid has never sat with material as long as they did. We gave them clay and we talked about curiosity and texture. And it's not about making the perfect thing. It's about the process and engaging in a way that that builds a bond with an adult that's positive. And so we've developed that programming. And I see that being beneficial for just everybody that's had stress in their lives and in their homes. I think that's like the combat that we can put in place to help like the anger or the frustration with what's happening right now. So that's the first thing. The second one, I've been thinking a lot about, we have been working with the Davis Joint Unified School District to develop a take-home art kit. And we received a grant that unfortunately only covered 1 grade within the elementary school, but we developed a kit. It's actually going out these next few weeks, and it's called Discover Your Inner Artist. And we actually were funded by the National Endowment for the Arts for it as well. And we have it fully translated into Spanish, and it's about discovering and looking at your environment around you and turning your story into a self-portrait. And that telling your story and being able to access those emotions and what you're going through in a way that's safe and therapeutic is really going to be important. And so I'm hoping that we can get a broader view of this on our youth in Yolo County and broader. It is based on state arts curriculum, and we've taken all of what we've learned through trauma-informed care and put it into this packet as well. And so those types of things, I think being very mindful of how you're putting forward your programming in the future is going to be really important. This took us longer than we expected, but we really wanted to make sure that it fed the whole soul and the whole human, and that it was culturally sensitive. And we went through a pretty extensive review process to do that. And I think that's what we're going to be held to as a standard moving forward. And I think we should do that for our youth in our community.
Thank you so much, Stacie. Well, we've talked quite a bit about what it looked like as we entered the pandemic, as we've moved through the pandemic, and really how our county has come together to meet this moment. I think we've been doing pretty good. Yolo County kind of takes a licking and keeps on ticking, and we can tell all over our county we have risen to meet this moment. Struggle from strength. Excuse me, I think the saying goes, from struggle comes new strength and new innovations. There might be some things in this moment we can take forward as we exit the pandemic. And so my next question is going to be, what would those things be? As we exit the pandemic, what else is needed in this moment? All we've done, which was huge. My gosh, it was absolutely huge. I wish the whole audience could just give you some of this, Absolutely. So the question is, what do you hope we learn and from this pandemic and do differently as we move toward exiting this pandemic? And I will ask Garth first.
Thanks, Tessa.
Mhm.
I think I would just reiterate the importance of collaboration. We've collaborated in very healthy and meaningful ways in the past. However, I think the need for collaboration in a deep way has been illuminated by the pandemic. And Stacie's comments actually reminded me of a session we held just this past Friday, specifically for our foster youth who are transitioning to the age, they're the transitional age, preparing for higher education. On Friday, we held a virtual FAFSA event to assist them with completing their financial aid, federal financial aid applications. One of the fun things that we did was our staff went out and delivered take and bake pizzas to the students, and kits that would allow them to again begin to explore their future selves. And then we were able to engage virtually in a conversation to inform them on higher ed, what their rights were as foster youth, how to continue to access services. So it was a wonderful event, but there was no way that YCOE could do that on our own, right? So this was a collaboration with Woodland Community College, there's Guardians Scholars Program, Child Welfare Services, our organization, just a multitude of youth serving agencies. And so for me, I would say this deep commitment toward really leveraging the power of collaboration, understanding the common needs and the common missions that we're on as a collective, and really organizing ourselves in a way that would allow our youth, families, and children to thrive in very intentional ways. So that's what I'm looking forward to, is really, spending some time post-pandemic or through the tail end of this thing, really exploring how we build the infrastructure to ensure that these collaborative experiences translate into a new way of doing work here in the county.
And to ask the question whether Zoom is going to be a part of that, does it have to be, is it still going to be around? Maybe that's for another panel, but we could sit with that a moment. I imagine we all could. Thank you, Garth. Heather, how would you answer that question, my friend?
Garth, I'm going to piggyback off you. I feel like the collaboration, we continue to collaborate with each other is going to be a vital key. Learning, doing things differently for families. And it's not what we say and what we do, it's how we make our families feel when we are working with them and what we're doing in their community and our agencies. And I truly believe that, this pandemic did kind of expose some kind of where our weaknesses for our family services programs and where our systems are in place. One is what I've learned is through childcare is that there's not affordable childcare. And if there is childcare out there, these families that are essential workers are making just minimum wage. They can't continue to work and continue to put their children in childcare and continue. The system for childcare subsidy is a vital piece to all of our systems and our core to all of the all of the jobs in our county and just trying to make accessible childcare available for families that are in need. And then the systems, what I'm going to start working on and looking at is the systems in place of how do those families access this childcare subsidy and how being able to access that quicker and being able to the vital resource for those families to continue to sustain their own family and the stressors of that and continue to put their children in childcare and not have to worry about homelessness or domestic violence or their stressors in their house or life that leads to that, child abuse and neglect. So, it's unfortunate that you do have to have a child welfare case to access that the childcare subsidy in that system. And it's unfortunate for families that are doing everything they could possibly can do to not go into the system. And that is what we are here for. Our mission is to not, we want to wrap those services and not have them go into that. So I feel like, you know, continuing to wrap around these services in our community and our families is vital for them to continue to thrive in our community.
Thank you, thank you. Jeneba?
So I thought about this question a lot. One of the things that I think we should be very mindful of moving forward is that cultural and racial equity piece. I don't know if you're going to answer that question at the end, Tessa, but I'll touch a little bit on this. I do agree, you know, I echo Garth and Heather's sentiment about interagency collaboration. I think that's the only way we've all been able to get through this pandemic and serve the needs of our families. However, the missing gap will be that cultural broker piece. I believe that during, you know, in response to this pandemic, a lot of people usually look at the institutions, right? They usually look at the institutions to address the needs of the families or to address the shelter in place mandate or to address the vaccine mandate or the testing mandate, but they don't really look at the community-based organizations who are the cultural brokers in these communities. Most of the community-based organizations, which I constantly refer to as the family resource centers, they're the ones who our undocumented families are talking to. They're the ones who someone who does not speak English, may be a new immigrant to the area, may not have any resources. They're the ones that these families are being referred to. However, sometimes I feel that those organizations are not invited to the table as one of the decision makers directly. So that's one piece that I would say, you know, as a county that we work on. You know, it does not have to be, you know, the formalized institutions, they have a place in our ecosystem. But if you really want to address racial equity or just equity in general, you need to be flexible and adaptable to the community that you serve and invite the people to the table who actually serve those communities. So that's what I would say in addressing that question.
Thank you, Jeneba, for that, because all of our panelists have kind of touched on racial equity and equity in general. I do appreciate you putting the spotlight on it. You know, I think it was James Baldwin who said, if you want to address those issues of poverty and child abuse and lack of education and on, ask the people who are broke and jobless and homeless, ask them, you know, to get the answers on what they need. So I totally appreciate you bringing that out, as well as an idea that as we move out of the pandemic, may we ask what is it that we're doing and how we're doing it that it seems to benefit and help one group while disadvantaging another group. It was like that before the pandemic and during the pandemic and now after the pandemic. Garth, then Stacie, and then Heather, would you like to speak on that?
I think the truth of the statement regarding the need to engage with those whom we intend to serve, right? Particularly thinking about these issues from a racial equity lens, incredibly important. I think they can't be understated, and I would include in that population our youth themselves, right? They are funds of knowledge that oftentimes go untapped, and their lived experiences should be considered as part of our solution, as our design, as we're thinking about how best to respond to their needs as well. And again, it brings me to another example of a reimagining of a youth serving organization, some programming in Woodland that we're engaged in currently, really focused on youth who have had experiences with gang involvement, whether it was deep or sort of on the edges. We're in the process currently of a 15 youth one-on-one interview process that we'll be bringing forward to the DA's office, the public defender's office, Woodland Chief of Police, the school district, this group of educators and community leaders who are really interested in accessing the youth voice and reimagining how we serve young people going forward. So I couldn't agree more with Jeneba said in regards to the need to really center our work in a way that recognizes, first of all, right, that these issues exist, and then really takes into account the voices of those we intend to serve as we co-construct what this new beginning will look like, and really honoring those voices in tangible and meaningful ways.
Stacie?
I'm trying to figure out what I could say in just a minute or two. I have so many thoughts on this. The Art Center has done a lot of thinking around how our dominant and white dominant and Christian dominant culture has affected arts through history, and how that shows up in the work that is portrayed in art history classes and what's held up as an ideal in art. And I just think what I'd like to say is around the race equity piece is that I think it's important for us to continue to question that and understand where our dominant culture we're being influenced by that, and then bring in other voices so that we can hear and learn and step back and let them lead as well. And so that's kind of in general how we're approaching this. We've done that. We sadly reoriented our summer camp 2 years ago to do that, and I thought we were very successful in that. And then of course we had to cancel it. So we're figuring out what's next for that, around serving the whole community and not just who walked in our doors prior to that summer camp. And then I'd like to just talk a little bit about what we're taking forward. All of this takes more time, right? It's really easy for an institution to say, oh, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to move forward. And to build relationships and to listen and to have people tell their stories takes more time. And I think what I'm working through is, how do you get the funding to do that in a way that's really authentic and not just move to that old refrain of let's just move forward and do this. And so that's kind of something I'm trying to figure out how to take forward. And I do think this idea that our organizations are all interconnected, and there's an intersection between arts and culture and all the health and human services. And I think we need to acknowledge that and spend the time to work together to bring that to the table. And I think that's going to help with moving through the trauma that we're all experiencing right now.
All right, thank you so much. Well, at this time, I want to open up our panel to the audience to ask questions. And Heather, as I look over, I want to ask you to answer the first one, which is, how can we support you? Ask the community audience. How can we support you? What else is needed for you to do your best work?
I was kind of like looking at what we could do to what the crisis nursery would help us. I mean, again, families are continuing to need care packages here at the nursery. We have diapers, wipes, food formula, like always needing to support those basic needs for families. For the crisis nursery, for the future, we're looking to expand our services. For what we need is, we do this in a 1,400 to 1,600 square foot home. And what we're looking at is in the future is to expand to a new, bigger facility. And so we can open up our programs to in-house. Again, our community and our families need counseling. They need mental health services. And I think that overall, we need support with supplies and having to support meeting the needs of our family and our community. And funding is vital for a crisis nursery. As you all know, there's only 4 in the state of California, and we are 1 in Yolo. We're small and mighty. But just so you guys can understand, like in the last 6 months, we have served over 372 children. That's we are going to be doubling what we served last year. Last 6 months, 1,300 care packages went out the doors to families that are in need. And that's from diapers, formulas, wipes, food, clothing, you name it. And if we can't provide it, we get those services. And I do have to say, through First 5, they have provided us many diapers and wipes and formula for the families through the Jessica Alba Foundation. But again, like hitting those rural areas, we've taken trucks out and meet those families that just can't even get in a car and get anywhere to get gas and supplies to get diapers. So we've been taking our trucks up there and dumping off diapers to families. And one day, 600 packages went out. So again, I would say funding for crisis nurseries is vital for programming and supplies. So, and again, collaborating with agencies, grants, making it easier and viable for us to collaborate in grants, working with these families together for funding.
I get to say it, Tessa, you're on mute. You're on mute. There we go.
Thank you. I had to do a little sign language over to the side with the folks in my house. Sorry about that. Yeah, so we're heading towards the close of our panel discussion right now. And so if you have any question for our panelists, please put them in the chat so that we can ask them. But as we await more questions to arise, I'll ask Jeneba, what do you need? What kind of support do you need from the community, the agencies and government right now in this moment? What else is needed?
I feel like Heather and I are on the same wavelength because we have very similar style organizations. We have a variety of programs, and one of the main things this whole pandemic has been the basic needs. We've had the diapers, wipes, formula, pack and play from First 5. We are so grateful to First 5 for everything that they've done to organize this relationship with the Jessica Alba Foundation. We wouldn't have been able to meet the needs of our family without that. However, we've also had small donors come forward, giving 1,000 here, 2,000 there, and those funds have actually been utilized to purchase grocery outlet, not food voucher, but gift cards, to purchase gas cards, to also purchase Walmart gift cards. And those gift cards have been disseminated to families who, although they're on CalFresh, and some families are not eligible for CalFresh because they're undocumented, or they're afraid to enroll. They're still afraid because of public charge. So we've been able to give families those gift cards to go purchase the culturally appropriate food or culturally needed food that they need within their household, or just baby supplies in general. So, ongoingly gas cards, gift cards, we've been able to help support families by connecting them with the library to get Wi-Fi access. But one of the needs that we see coming up within our home visitation program is people needing assistance to pay their cell phone bills. They're utilizing their cell phones to access all the virtual platforms, and kids are actually using their parents' cell phones to access school, or using their parents' hotspot on their cell phone to access school. So we've had some people come forward saying that they're not able to pay their cell phone bills, and grants do not pay for those basic need items. A lot of the grants right now are centered around eviction prevention, which is wonderful. We're grateful to Yolo Community Foundation too for providing that to us during the pandemic. So I would say basic needs, and if anyone is wanting to, especially government institution or foundations, if they're wanting to support this effort by giving grants, I say give the money and get out of the way. I'm more, I don't know if you guys read the article about, I forgot her name, Bezos, I think Jeff Bezos' wife or ex. So she pledged to give away her billions of dollars that she has. In December, she gave away billions of dollars to all these different organizations in the United States without requiring anything from them. She had her people research these organizations, give them the money and said, I trust you to get the work done, and got out of the way. So if people
Nice.
really want to support these informal networks, first of all, listen to the informal networks. The Family Resource Center, it is a formal and informal network. Listen to the people, listen to how they do the job, support them by doing the job, and get out of the way. Not popular opinion, but that's how I feel. Get out of the way, let us do our job.
Absolutely. Well, Jeneba, I think you answered the question from Shelley in our audience, which was how can we support those informal networks? Because often those organizations are underfunded. So I think you hit the nail right on the head there.
Yeah. So another question came in about accountability. When I say get out of the way, some funders tend to be very prescriptive in how to do the work. That's what I mean by get out of the way. So they tend to have very prescriptive way as to this is what we want to see, this is what it is, this is what it is. You know, life is not prescribed. Different cultures, different languages, they operate differently. It's not prescribed. So when you put those conditions in place, it makes it harder to do the job on the organization. And organizations tend to want, take the money because they know the services are needed. So they will move forward and try to adjust as best as possible. But then when adjusting, there's no flexibility in how to work with the community. So that's what I meant. So thank you for putting that in the chat so I can elaborate on that.
Very good. Thank you so much. And so very true. In the moment when we need to be innovative in our response because things are moving so fast and so fluid, the idea that we got to count it too can kind of get in the way sometimes, those measures there. So thank you for speaking to that. Tracy Favre is in our audience. Welcome, Tracy. And Tracy says, I would love to see the art packet Stacie showed again. And is there a way for folks in the community to help out with that?
I guess I'll start, and I guess that will lead into my what people could do to help the Art Center, because I agree this balance between essential first needs response and how are we going to sustain arts and culture institutions so that we can be there to help recover is a challenge. And I understand that that's a challenge in donors' minds, but I would say we want to be here to help with the recovery. So donations and funding from the city and county level is going to be crucial in that. Arts and culture organizations in general have been kind of underfunded within the stimulus programs as a whole. And so we've been kind of fighting to figure out how to stay afloat during all of that. And so we do have the art kit, and that's been helpful. And I don't have it on our website, like a location you could go and purchase, but maybe Holly, we could share my email address afterwards, or I could talk about how to do that. But if anybody knows anybody in the schools or an organization that would like to purchase these, or even if you would like to put them in like your LCAP funding for next year, and we actually work with the school district on curriculum that we can get to the kids that will help with this social, emotional learning and kind of telling their story from the pandemic, we would love to work throughout Yolo County. I know we've worked in most of the county with various organizations, so we'd love to do that. So we could do something more immediate. We could do something for next year. We've learned a lot through the process and feel really strongly that we can provide something that the youth can really help heal through as they get back into kind of what's going to be normal life. So so those are kind of the ways. So I saw my email flash through the chat. You're welcome to email me. Like I said, we actually have been talking to some school districts outside of Yolo County, and I would love to be able to work with Yolo County schools. Organizations that are not school districts, I think, can also benefit. And so Tracy, we could talk about CASA, and Garth, if there's something around the foster youth, we can, I'd love to chat about that as well.
Definitely. Did you see that other question there? Mel is asking how much does one kit cost?
The grant covered a kit for $50.
Wow.
And so we did, and there's some, we could talk about volume and who orders supplies and all of that. So what grade was it designed for? So it's based on the state arts curriculum standards for elementary school. Although we did have a bunch of high school volunteers pack the kits for us last week, and they all wanted one. And so I believe that it can be used in other grades. I think if we wanted to do high school, we have some cute little kid things in here. We have, what do we have? We might change, like, I think we have kid portraits, right? So we might change like the portraits being maybe less kid and more teen or something like that. So we could co-create something that fits for the school districts and the clients that might get these. But like I said, I've gotten feedback that it's probably a 3rd grade through 10th, 11th grade. Although I'd like to do it myself, so.
Yes, coloring is good for everybody sometimes, absolutely. I'm going to ask Garth, Garth, would you like to summarize kind of where we are in this moment as we come to a close? And what you'd like to see for the school district moving forward?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I think actually I'm going to go back real quickly to the question of what we need support, and Jeneba's I think insight is critical. One example of where we saw a funder really provide the money and get out of the way effectively was in the fall when the Board of Supervisors granted a $250,000 award to the local child care planning council along with YCOE to provide for support to child care providers and to families directly. We were able to facilitate the expenditure very, very quickly, provide the needed data, but in a meaningful way that was meaningful both to the supervisors as well as to us, right, the grantees. So that's an example of where Yolo County provided that same kind of support, right? That's needed. Going forward with our schools, I think there's going to be opportunity for our community-based organizations, our partner agencies to continue to add value to the educational experiences of our students, both in the classroom and outside of the classroom. So keeping an eye on opportunities to collaborate. Again, I can't go away from that theme. I think that's what's going to really carry the day. Jeneba has really gotten me really thinking about this issue around racial equity and just really building our knowledge base around how students seeing who they are in our curriculum, in our those who we celebrate. And our office sponsored a membership, a subscription for 4 schools in our county for a Black History Month virtual celebration that will take students through a 5-part series, but translates into a 365-day experience for Black history, right? And I'll share, I just sent Jessica an email link, and we'll ask to share it with those who registered for a Black History is Our Story concert tomorrow evening. It's a free concert. Takes place at 6 o'clock in the evening, and this is through Schoolyard Wrap. This is the subscription that we've offered to 4 schools in our county. So lots of opportunity for us to continue learning about the unique needs of our students, and really ways for us to collaborate across the county and in meeting those needs.
Thank you so much, Garth, and to all of our panelists. As we close, I'd like to turn it over to Jessica and Holly. I appreciate you all so much for the conversation, and I know our community does as well. Holly and Jessica, would you like to take over? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Tessa, Garth, Heather, Jeneba, and Stacie. We really appreciate you joining us today and sharing your tremendous expertise. We also really appreciate the strong attendees. Really a great audience today, particularly for our first panel. We hope that you'll come back to the rest of the series and share the word with your friends, colleagues, neighbors, and so on about our future topics. Our next panel is next Thursday at 11 a.m. The focus is on food insecurity, another critical need in Yolo County. And you can register or find more information about next week, as well as every other week in the series at yolocf.org. We are thrilled for the opportunity to host this conversation. Tremendously thankful to Sutter Health for making it possible and to all of you for participating. Thank you.
Thank you. It's nice